Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Shop Talk Theater series. My name is Seema Sueko. I work in the United States, and I'm coming to you from Honolulu, Hawaii. And I'm so honored to have this conversation with multidisciplinary artist Irina Kruzhilina. We already have posted Irina's bio on the platform you're watching on, so please take a moment to give a read of her bio in Moscow. And before we proceed, we'd like to acknowledge that we're living in a difficult moment, and that now more than ever, communication and engagement between regular citizens is an important reminder of our shared humanity. Thank you for engaging with us. Please also feel free to use the chat function at any time during this conversation to post your questions for Irina. We'll have our discussion for about 45 minutes, and then we'll turn to the questions in the last 15 minutes. And so welcome, Irina. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And hello, Seema. Thank you.
It's great to see you. Irina, you are a multidisciplinary theater artist, and you write that you work at this intersection of visual art, live performance, and civic engagement. And so for those who may not be familiar with your work, could you describe what it is you do as an artist?
Thank you, Seema, for the question. I will try my best to answer that. So I do consider myself an interdisciplinary artist, and in a way I've called myself a slash. I'm a visual director, slash a scenographer, slash a designer, slash a professor, painter, artistic director, yoga teacher, and many, many other things. And I chose performance as an ultimate medium because I can incorporate many different elements of my artistic practice into that. And as an interdisciplinary artist who works in this intersection of visual art, live performance, civic engagement, my work really involves creating visually stunning performances which are rooted in the current events which are happening in the world right now. Visuals are very important to me, and I was trained as a visual artist in the beginning, but I think in live performance, visuals really play a huge part in focusing work which is really focused on any kind of social, political issues which are happening in the world today. And text is certainly important, but visuals have a more immediate power to transform us and to transform the audiences and society. And therefore, I try to merge the visual art and the live performance together. In general, I'm really interested in creating work which shakes things up and which asks questions and which connects people and connects audiences and communities. And in many of my works, I really engage the communities in the creation of whatever it is I'm creating. So I work with a lot of youth, within the privileged youth. I work with immigrants at the moment, and so on.
That's terrific. Can you describe a project that from your past that maybe you're most proud of?
Yeah, the project which I would like to describe is called A Dozen Dreams. And I've created it with two wonderful collaborators, John Eisner and Anya Hamburger. We co-created this site-specific immersive event, right? Pretty much in the midst of the pandemic. Right at the time, actually, when first day we were allowed to not wear masks in public spaces. So what we did, we asked a dozen of beautiful female playwrights in New York City to write what they're dreaming about. It's a very simple question. And then we asked each of them to write a 3-minute play based on their dreams. And these dreams could be sleeping dreams, waking dreams, dreams for the future, where frustrations with what was going on in the world and so on. And once the plays were developed, I transformed them into beautiful environments, 12 environments, together with my collaborators, which together create some kind of beautiful maze. And the show took place at the Brookfield Place in New York City, which is a part of the World Trade Center. And I will actually ask Rob to share the visual if possible. I have a few images which could be helpful for the audiences to see. Thank you so much. So this is the Brookfield Mall, downtown New York, and we're very lucky to have our site-specific performance here. So we had this beautiful winter garden, which you can see on the left, and there was also given an ex-boutique, which was a very posh boutique pre-pandemic, but was empty as many other boutiques during the pandemic. At the bottom, you can see this crazy serpentine-like ground plan of 12 environments. And we started and ended at the Winter Garden with room 1 and room 12. And Rob, if you could please go to the next slide so I can share a few environments. So you can see very, very different environments which were created using scenography, sets, lights, projections, and so on. And they were completely different from one another and really expressed the worlds of the playwrights and their words. And in the next slide, you can also see that in addition to this, we also created a room which we called Room 13, where we created this wall, the dream world, where the audiences could write what they were dreaming about at the moment. And this is a very cute picture of this little boy trying to get a chalk to write his dream, but he was too short, too short to get it. But they helped him and he wrote his dream. And it was very inspiring because by the end of every day, the wall will be completely, full of dreams of people. And it was really a social place for people to come together and share their dreams for the post-pandemic world.
That is beautiful. I'm curious, thinking about the environments that you created, could you give an example of what it is that a playwright wrote that inspired how you found that visually?
Yes, of course. Interestingly, often when I create environments for the playwrights, they're very not literal. I don't take the words which playwrights write and try to translate them into the visual world. I rather try to transform them into the visual, which is quite different. For example, one of the dreams by Andrea Tom, for example, that was the room number 2. Everything was by rooms. She was talking about her saying goodbye to her childhood home. And I created this environment. So I created this environment starting from the back of the store. And in the back of the store, there were all kinds of different places. For example, an office, a storage room, a bathroom, and so on. And so I built the environment around the architecture which already existed. And her dream had 2 different rooms, the storage room in which I inserted the forest and also a little kitchen which I created into a window which kind of express her childhood homes. So the beauty of this project, because it was so site-specific, is really to find the merge between the existing architecture and the walls which me and playwrights were creating together.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much for describing that and sharing those beautiful images with us. I noticed that on your website, right on the front page, you have this wonderful quote by Meyerhold, where he has said, "I want to burn with the spirit of the times. I want all servants of the stage to recognize their lofty destiny. I'm disturbed at my comrades' failure to rise above narrow caste interests, which are alien to the interests of society at large. Yes, the theater can play an enormous part in the transformation of the whole of existence." Can you tell us why this quote is meaningful for you and how it guides you?
Yeah, thank you, Sima, and thank you for looking at my website. This is such a giant quote. Every part of that, every sentence is in a way a statement on its own, which inspires me and which guides me through everything I do. And even the beginning of the quote, "burn with the spirit of the time," already guides me to create the work which is in the here and in the now, and which deals with the problems which we're struggling with. And I wanted to share one of the projects which I had the privilege to design. Rob, if you could possibly share the next slide, it would be wonderful. Yes, thank you. So this is a project which I was honored to design for a wonderful collaborator of mine, amazing creator Lars Jan, and the project is called Holocene, which deals with the environmental changes which we're all experiencing in the world. Right now I'm in New York City, and if you haven't seen this photos of post-apocalyptic New York with yellow skies, buildings which you almost cannot see behind the smoke, red sun, and you don't quite understand what it is. This is the reality, and the fires and smoke which come from Canada at the moment, and this is our everyday existence. So this project was a giant performance installation, which is called Holocene, and it was performed in a big aquarium with people performing in the water, performing very simple everyday behaviors as they adjust to the rising levels of the aquarium. So there are many performances in the water, right? And they're usually very beautiful and poetic, but what Lars did, he engineered the aquarium where the water levels constantly fall and then rise, which is a metaphor of what's happening in the world with the global warming. And what the beauty of the project was really what we performed in there. At the very beginning of the project, we asked people from around the world to document and send us what they're doing exactly the same every day. Like what is no matter what, they will not change, how they make coffee, tune a guitar, go out, and so on. And then using those videos, we choreographed what we call everyday behaviors, little rituals, which were placed inside the aquarium, and then the performers had to constantly struggle as they performed those little rituals with constant changes of the water level. So this is kind of a metaphor of how our little everyday rituals and behaviors cause the global warming, which we're all experiencing in the world at the moment.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thank you. And it's really, Sima, we traveled the world with that. We've been in a lot of public squares. Some of these images are from Times Square, actually, which really kind of froze one of the busiest places in the world and made it slow down, and it became really mesmerizing. So this is really how Markhold's quote inspires me to be part of the projects which are about what's happening in the world right now. Rob, thank you so much for sharing this. And then if you move down the quote and you know, when Markhold is talking about us as theater makers recognizing our lofty destiny, it's really reminding us of a role which we as theater makers can play in a society, which I think is very important, the role which goes way beyond creating pretty things or entertaining people. And a lot of my work really recognizes what it is to be a theater maker in a contemporary society. Right now, I'm creating a new immersive performance, which is called The Cattle Call, and which deals with immigration policies in the West. And it really brings the attention to the randomness of asylum policy, which makes a decision of who can stay and who can go based on a very simple short interview of the a person interviewing a person interviewing an asylum seeker. And I'm staging this cattle call in a casting show format, kind of like America Got Talent or Can You Dance and so on, and really drawing the parallels between the entertainment show contents for fighting for fame and the asylum refugees who are really seeking for the asylum. And it's a very meaningful piece at the moment with the immigration crisis which is happening. But the main idea for me is to bring the audiences together, which are both the immigrants and the natives who were born in New York, and to see how I can create a dialogue between them and how I can put people together. if you again keep scrolling down the Marshall statement, and there is this statement about rise above the narrow caste interests, right? It's very important to me because in the States, the country which is so large, the theater is not always available to people, right? First of all, you need to live in some kind of center where you can go to the theater. And secondly, you need to be able to afford to go to the theater. So to me, I made a decision a long time ago to create public performances which are accessible to a wider population. So Rob, that image which you just brought up, if I could please ask you to bring it back, it would be really wonderful. So at the very beginning of my career in New York, I had the privilege to work with Marble Mines, one of the most legendary companies. And that was my first site-specific performance, which was created on a giant barge, which would be floating around East River. And then the audience would watch the performance from the shore. And this was a kind of avant-garde musical theater about New York City. And it was a gift of Marble Mines, the company which existed for 30 years, and New York City, which gave you a home for 30 years. And therefore, it was absolutely essential that the performance was free to public. And since then, every year or two, I'm trying to create performance in a public space, which is free and accessible to everyone in the city.
Wonderful.
So, thank you. This quote is just so big, and we can keep going and try to pinpoint every single word, but it's definitely been my greatest inspiration.
It's so clear that you take every sentence in that quote quite to heart, which is beautiful. As I listen to you describe the work you've done and what work you're currently working on, I'm very curious about the role of collaboration, because you are a director, you are a designer, all these identities that often in a traditional theater format get siloed. The director does this, the designer does this, but you do a lot of it. And yet I know you collaborate with others. So could you talk a little bit about that collaboration? I'm just very curious, and maybe particularly the project you're currently working on, the cattle call. I'm curious how that collaboration is working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think collaboration is giant, is essential, and I think we have a lot to learn as theater makers. We love talking about collaboration. If you read whole round articles every month, there are hundreds of articles about collaboration, but somehow we still did not quite get there, because theater could also be quite territorial. And like you were saying, there are boxes with roles, with well-defined roles, which we defined, years and years ago. And people can become quite territorial about these roles. It's interesting for me, Sima, because I'm trained as a designer, as a scenographer. For example, the word scenographer is not very popular in the States, because if you're a scenographer, it means that you're both kind of director and the designer, and you start stepping onto toes of a director. And we prefer to use the term designer, which means that you support somebody else's vision. And the way I was trained was slightly different. So finding a way to really be equal collaborators and be partners and co-authors is not something that's often practiced here. So to me, collaboration is absolutely at the center of everything what I do. When I bring my collaborators, I invite them to be co-authors on the project. And if I collaborate with somebody else as a designer, also it's very important that my voice is heard and I'm not just supporting somebody's vision, but really an equal partner. So in terms of a cattle call, which I'm just in the beginning, we're devising the piece, and together with theater artists, we're also bringing refugees who were granted asylum status and figuring out what it means to bring their voices and to make them true collaborators to the performers rather than just using their material as an inspiration for the performance. I teach collaboration. I teach collaboration at the universities around the country, and it's it's very interesting topic at the moment, as we all strive to achieve it, but sometimes we fail. My partner is a scientist, and at the beginning of the pandemic, when all the scientists in the world started truly collaborating to figure out how to develop a vaccine, it was very amazing and inspiring for me to see it. I was like, oh, we theater makers have a lot to learn.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To learn.
You referenced teaching just now, and I know that's a big part of your practice as well. So you teach collaboration. Could you talk about the things you teach? And then I'm curious what it is you're seeing in this today. Does it give you hope? Are you inspired? Or yeah, if you don't mind talking about that a little bit.
Absolutely, yes. I teach many classes from directing Shakespeare to site-specific performance. I've been very lucky to be a faculty member of the New School University. This is one of the top universities in the New York City. And when I was teaching, it was still an old program. I started teaching 5 years ago at the School of Drama, where I was teaching Shakespeare and impact of design and performance and so on. And the years after I started teaching, we started developing a new program, which is quite interesting. It's called MFA, Master's Program in Contemporary Performance at the New School of Drama. And it's really the first interdisciplinary MFA program of its kind in the United States. There is no separation between performance directors and playwrights. Everybody gets the same degree. And we're really focusing on collaboration and making things. So it's truly theater makers. We have a lot of projects where groups of students develop performances, they devise, they create site-specific performances, they stage plays, but it's really about a group of people working together and finding new collaborative approaches to making work together. Aside from that, I also teach multiple courses outside of New School. I teach a lot of workshops. I started teaching workshops to non-theater makers, and also started teaching workshop to theater makers from all different backgrounds, where people will get together in the same room and make things together. And it was very exciting. I would teach it at conferences and so on. I guess the most important for me in teaching is how can people from different backgrounds create something together, and how they can celebrate the differences and really find the strengths and do work together.
That is exciting. I'm so curious about the workshops to non-artists. Do you mind describing one of those workshops? Just giving us a little bit more of an example?
Yeah, I teach visual expression. You know, as I mentioned, I believe that text is very important, but it's also the visuals which play an extraordinary part in the performances. So for non-artists, I teach how to express characters visually, for example. We play with, you know, looking at the play, choosing the characters, and then figuring out what would the space look like, what would the costume look like, what would I look like if I were a character in this play. And we use very, very simple materials from balloons to paper to create sculptures and to create environments. And it's unbelievable, because every time when I teach, people say, well, you know, I'm not creative, or I don't know how to make things. And we all used to make things till we were asked to stop doing it in about third or fourth grade, right? And so to see people connecting to their creativity is quite amazing. So I think basically what this workshops are about is about imagination and creativity, and using very, very simple tools and simple materials and simple prompts to lift people's creativity.
That sounds, I want to sign up for one of those workshops. That sounds terrific. Your work overall, it's immersive, it is site specific, and you create experiences for the audience. I think we call all of this experience design. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that, this concept of experience design and the process that goes into it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I mean, I create both immersive site-specific work, but I've also done a lot of more traditional theater and worked on all kinds of stages, from proscenium stages to black boxes and so on. But when we talk about experience design and kind of what experience design means, experience design is really an approach to design where the final product is the experience of the audience rather than a show, video game, or anything like that. And of course, both forms of live performance, the more traditional live performance and also immersive and site-specific, are about creating experience for the audience. It just approaches are slightly different, right? In a more traditional approach, the experience is more cognitive, and it has to do with what I would like my audience to understand. And in immersive performances, it's more embodied because we share the same world as the audience with the performers and performance, right? We don't need to break the fourth wall because the fourth wall simply does not exist. And creating experience then, and the starting point is slightly different because I'm asking myself a question: what do I want the audience to embody? What do I want them to feel? And the beauty about creating embodied experience is that you can really use all the senses, right? It's a multisensorial approach. So when I create those experiences, I use not only the visual and the hearing, but also I use smells, I use taste, I use touch, and so on, which just opens a much larger experience for the audience, right? And so my question is, what do I want the audience to experience and how can I get there? If I'm creating the experience where I would like my audience to feel uncomfortable and claustrophobic, I have a freedom and immersive space to create the environment which will allow them to feel so. I can turn the temperature up if I want them to feel hot. I don't need them to look somewhere where the actors experience heat. I can make my audience experience the same what the performers experience. And in addition, when I create performances, they often activate the audience. So it's not about what people see or hear, it becomes about what people do. And I create a lot of experiences where the audience interact either with performers or the performance environment. So it's a slightly different way of creating experiences, but again, both the traditional form of theater, of course, and the immersive allow for the audience to experience something magical.
That is fantastic. I'm thinking about the piece about the dreams. Mm-hmm. And what do you think, as you were designing it and as you saw it come to fruition, what do you think was the experience that audience had? And I'm sure there were, each person's different, so maybe they experienced different things. But if there were certain things you were hoping to achieve and maybe certain things you saw in its implementation.
Absolutely. It was very interesting when we got the dreams back from playwrights. They were very different. And me, Annie, and John Eisner were trying to create some kind of arc where which will create, some kind of overall story between the dreams, which were absolutely not connected. And the arc which we found were from dreams which were a bit more dark, isolated towards the dreams which had hope for the future. And so the spatial dramaturgy which I used and created in the space was going from the rooms which were smaller and darker towards the rooms which slowly opened up. And at the end, I took the audience out of this boutique store into this luscious, bright lobby of the Winter Garden with this translucent blue sculpture in which when the audience enters, they can look up and see the video of the clouds passing by while listening to the very hopeful music written by our composer. So the experience of the audience had an arc, right? From isolation, darkness, hopelessness towards some hope for the future. And each of the dreams and each of the environments which I have created were kind of along this journey, helping the audience to have the transformation. Because the most important when we create experience design is to think, how does the audience change from the moment when they enter the experience to the moment when they exit, right? What do we bring to the experience and how can we transform it in exactly 1 hour? And that's what the performance was.
That's wonderful. I'm curious, do you get any feedback from the audience? on that particular piece, for example, I don't know if you overheard the audience saying things of what they were experiencing.
Yeah, we had an online component where people could also write their dreams or write their feedbacks. But I think the biggest compliment and the feedback was really as soon as people, exit the last room in the Winter Garden, they go straight to the board, to the room 13, to the dream wall, and write their dreams for the future, which were very hopeful and actually beautiful. And that wall became a very hopeful, delightful place for the New York community. There would be a man who would propose to a woman there. There would be kids gathering. It became just a public gathering space for people. And I think when they have that, when they had a chance to go through this journey, it definitely gave them hope.
That's wonderful. How inspiring. Gosh, I wish I could have experienced that. Now, speaking about transformational experiences, we've all gone through this global pandemic. We're on the outskirts of it, some say, and that led to a lot of transformations for individuals. And I'm curious if it had any impact on you, your work practice or your personal practices these last few years. Could you share?
Yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like every other theater artist, of course, devastated. A lot of my performances got canceled. I was absolutely uncertain about the future all of a sudden. In thousands of years, the form becomes impossible because there is no longer gathering between the public and the performance itself. So we were all devastated. I'm sure, Sima, you remember those days.
Oh, yes.
But it was extremely important to figure out how to reinvent the artistic practice so you could still be in service to people who need you, right? Because theater is still, performance is still such a transformative art form which has power to transform people and potential to transform people. So I started, like many of us, trying to reinvent myself. And I know that a lot of people started doing online performances, which was very interesting. Even A Dozen Dreams, what was beautiful about A Dozen Dreams, which I created at the midst of pandemic, was that there was no live performers, right? It was the collaboration between me as an audience member and the performance environment. So all of a sudden, this absolute need for in-person live performer and the audience to be together in the same place was challenged. And all of a sudden, the performance environment becomes a performer. Which I find, also inspiring, and it's just a different form. It's not that one is better than the other, but this idea that theater can only exist where there is a live performer and the live audience was challenged. Mm-hmm. So I started also looking at gathering people on Zoom and see what can come out of that. I was commissioned by Peace Child International to create a piece with youth from all around the world. And Rob, if you could please show the image. It will not be Disney images, but a few images after this. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, this one. Thank you. And this place was called Journey of a Dream. It seems like I do a lot of performances about dreams. And this was a multi-generational performance which gathered youth from 17 countries. And for us to talk about youth dreams for the future. And at the end, we created these beautiful postcards. Every young person created a beautiful postcard to send to representatives of the UN and to make a personal connection between the UN representative, between the adult and the child, and to make the adults responsible for making the wishes of this youth come true. And at the end, this performance, this project cultivated in a film which I created, which I developed and created and somewhat edited, which was live streamed at the 75th anniversary of the UN. And so this youth which I worked with were so excited that they actually felt like they had power, they had a voice, they had agency, and that they would be heard by people who are in power. And possibly, possibly some small change would be possible in their everyday life. And it was extraordinary to work with them, because the first thing which everybody brings was the global woman. This is what's in their minds, in every single kid, no matter where they're from. So it was wonderful to connect to them, work with them, and truly learn from them, and serve them the best I can.
That's incredible. What a great pandemic project. Sorry, I think I interrupted. Were you about to say something else?
No, overall, I think I was extremely busy during the pandemic. And, we constantly need to reinvent ourselves to find what's useful for the public, and how our art can really serve and inspire other people. And there's no shortage of that. You just need to keep reinventing your toolbox
Yes.
in the new environment.
Are there tools from those isolation years of the pandemic that you still use now that we're out and gathering again?
Absolutely. I mean, editing a film and working with an editor was very, very helpful to me. But also, I think creating this performance installation is really important, and finding how to create it and tools to create them. Even in a cattle call, a part of a cattle call is a performance installation. So the way I'm creating a cattle call, before the audience comes into live performance, they have a chance to experience what it means to be a refugee preparing for the asylum interview. So I'm creating a space where audience members can, for example, learn how to pack a suitcase if you are leaving your country for good, and how much you can squeeze into a suitcase.
Wow.
Or have a session with a coach, which would teach you how to pass an interview, and just different stations. So the skill which I developed in doing performance without live actors, I'm definitely using in my work, and most of my work is now a merge of spatial installation and live performance happening together in one space.
That's great. Now, there were a couple of slides we skipped over to get to this. Do you want to talk about those other slides?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So when we talk, and when Marigold, of course, brings how transformative art could be and performance, I often think about if we can transform a life of a child and create experiences where a child feels magic and transformation. That's wonderful. I created a few shows for Disney, and people, often are skeptical about working at Disney because it's a big corporation and so on. But I felt that the performances which I created had an amazing imagination and amazing support from my collaborators at Disney. And I was actually given creative freedom to create work which is not what you typically see at Disney World. So I worked in the parks. One was at Disney Animal Kingdom, and another one is in Tokyo. And you can see here the slide with a performance which is called Rivers of Light, which I created some years ago for Disney Animal Kingdom. And I was invited to create characters. So I created these beautiful shamanistic characters. So it's not Mickey Mouse, it's not what you usually see in Disney. And it was a beautiful performance about a celebration of animal spirits because it was at the Animal Kingdom. And these characters were absolutely transformative. And my thought is, if the kids see something like this for the first time, for many American kids, what they see in terms of live performance for the first time is during their vacation with their parents in Disney World. So if this is the first live performance, it's better be good. All right. And so I feel like as a theater maker and as a performance maker, I had a privilege and an opportunity to create something absolutely transformative for the kids. So this was the first performance. And also the second performance, I did this giant parade. I think it's the biggest parade ever made in Disney. And this was at Tokyo Disney, which featured 140 performers, 90 new characters, which I had a chance to design all of them. And I also worked with some existing characters. But this performance also, like just talking about accessibility, this was played for 5 years, 3 times a day. So all of a sudden, 15,000 kids can see something so magical and be happy for that hour in their lives, right? So if I have an opportunity to change lives for 15,000 kids for 1 hour, it's absolutely something that I would jump on and see how I can use my creativity, my imagination, and my talent to create something transformative.
Well, I am not a child any longer, but I can tell you I am inspired by looking at these images, and I'm filled with wonderment and joy, which is such a beautiful thing to feel in these times. I want to take a moment to remind our audiences to please feel free to type in any questions that you may have, and we'll be getting to those in the next 5 minutes. But I am curious, as I look at the work with Disney, and they are both performer centric to them, could you talk about collaborating with performers? You've clearly collaborated with space and other designers and directors, but talking about maybe collaborating with a performer, particularly when you're creating a new character, were they involved in that creation process as well? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you, Rob, for the slides. In terms of Disney, there was not much collaboration with performers, but there was great collaboration with choreographer. And so whatever I was creating was so important for the movement and for the characters. But it's really, when I create characters or create costumes, it's very important for me, how can this outside shell, which I create inside, inspire the performer to be a specific character? How can it inspire them to move? How can it inspire them to speak, to sing, and so on? Because again, I feel that often kind of the designers are, some on the side, performers are on the side, choreographers are on the side, and then the way in American theater, the way it works, something shows up like 2 weeks before the opening, and all of a sudden the set is uncomfortable, the props nobody knows how to hold, and the costumes are uncomfortable, and everybody's like, oh, if I could just go back to my black sweatpants and cardboard props and be on, flat stage with some masking tape around, which has nothing to do with reality. I find it very problematic. So in my work, I always, because, I'm in independent theater, I just always strive to create work which is more fluid. And the system, when you show up, 4 weeks before, really doesn't work for me. I devise a lot of work where I bring where if I have a chance, I create work in the environment and do all the rehearsals in the environment, or I make sure that the theater which is bringing me in, I make some kind of deals that we will be rehearsing in mock-ups, that we will build some kind of a set where people can feel that they can interact with, because I think that performers learn how to interact with each other, right? How to partner with another performer, and they really don't have an opportunity to learn that the partners could also be things, could be a prop, could be a costume, and it's an equal partner. And the magic on stage really happens when everything is in partnership and collaboration with one another, whether it's a human being or not. So it's also one of the things which I teach my students and teach performers and teach directors, how to be in the space and how to partner with non-human elements on stage.
Oh, how wonderful. It is curious how we do try segment that work in a traditional theater making setting in the US, where the time that an artist, a performer has on stage is so limited before the audience arrives, So
Right.
You raise a wonderful point. Speaking about working in the theater in this country, in the United States, as I talk to my colleagues across the field, it's a very precarious time right now. At many theaters, audiences may not have returned to pre-pandemic numbers. There's high turnover in staff as people at organizations find different things to do or different ways they want to live their lives. And so there's turnover in staff. Some of the government funding that theaters received during the pandemic has ended. And so seasons are starting to shrink. As a result, I'm hearing there's less work for freelance artists. So that's what I'm hearing as I speak with colleagues across the U.S. I'm curious what you are experiencing or seeing in New York as well as across this country.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate what's going on, and theaters being somewhat in decline, and some theaters shutting down. And for example, the most important American festival under the radar pretty much ceased to exist a few days ago, which is which brought the whole New York community and the national community in great shock and mourning at the moment. Even Broadway, is not immune. From what I understand, theaters are half full, and the runs are much shorter, and so on. And it's truly devastating. I think in terms of my work, I was never really a person for hire, right? A work for hire. The way I develop my work, I would figure out what it is I want to do, and then gather collaborators and make it somehow work. There are a few artists who bring me along as they start new projects as well. But I think that's the main difference. It's not like I ever get a call from an artistic director in American theater to do something. It's more of what is work which is needed at the moment, and how I can create that work which is needed. As a leading artist, or who I would like to support as a designer, scenographer, visual dramaturg, and so on. So it definitely affects me, but it's also me being independent theater artist rather than a freelance artist. I think there is a slight difference there.
I think there's a significant difference, and I think many freelance artists would want to take classes from you on how to be an independent artist, reliance of an institution. So I am curious, thinking about that, how do you go from idea to getting it funded to make it happen? What are some of those steps you do to bring it to fruition?
I think it's the same road as all of us take. We figure out what you want to say, what the project will be to say it, what's the most singular vision which could manifest that thing, and then figure out who might be funders, how you apply for grants, and who might be your partners. And I think that partner with both theater organizations and not theater organizations is important. I do quite a lot of work with the community, which is important to me, and then finding out who would be interested to partner with me in that work is absolutely essential. But because, Sima, as you might know, there is just a very limited pool of money which is dedicated specifically to theater, and there are just so many grants. And when you just think maybe 5,000 people applied for this grant and 10 people are going to get it, is not the most inspiring and confident thought. So literally really looking for funding outside of theater communities is essential at the moment.
Wow, inspiring. And we have a question from somebody in the audience. In your opinion, what personal qualities are the most crucial for an artistic director or scenographer?
Well, these are different things, artistic director and scenographer, but they could be together. I'm doing many of those things together. Thank you so much for the question. I think the most important quality is to be collaborative, to give people space, to celebrate their strengths, to complement each other, to hear everyone, whether you're working, when you're doing a production, so many people are involved, from a wardrobe person and makeup artist to artistic director to the company, and all those voices are equally important. And when you're a generous artist and when you work together with people, you have to respect them, to like them, and to give them space where they can actually create the best work which they can create. And I think it's extremely important to have a vision, right? To have a vision which people would be inspired to be with you for, right? So you need to definitely be a leader and to have a vision which inspires people who you're bringing on board.
Great answers. How did you learn those things? How did you learn about how to be a good collaborator? How did you learn how to surface your vision? Could you talk about that a little bit?
How to be important collaborator, you learn from awful collaborations, which I've had in your life. I want to say, I just want to make sure that when I'm a leading artist, I will never do it to my collaborators. I think that was the best school of life, because there are several kinds of collaborators, and sometimes you're really brought to just support or satisfy somebody's vision and be just a maker, a doer, where your ideas and your thoughts are absolutely not interesting to anybody else. But I think that era of theater and performance is already behind us, at least in the States, but I believe in other places as well. And I'm really excited about celebrating the collaborations at the moment. In terms of the vision, I'm inspired by so many things in life, Sima. I think that be a performance, a theater artist, you need to know a lot. You need to be in many places, going to museums, going to libraries, traveling, being with people is just as important as going and seeing the performances. I would say that I go to museums more often than I go to theaters, for sure. And we are as visual people, and we just gather information and just building that information so you can have a creative library inside yourself, inside your heart, inside your brain. So when you find a new problem which you would like to address, there will be some vision somewhere deep inside your heart, which is now ready to be manifested.
That's wonderful. As I think about your body of work, you've done, there's such a great diversity in the work that you've done. But I'm curious about what connects it all. For you, is there some central idea you're working on, or if you could talk a little bit about the connective tissue in your work.
I think the connective tissue is to create work which is visual, and to create work which is relevant to what's going on in the world. And merging those two together is important, because a lot of performances which are socially engaged performances and so on, I find some of them being somewhat dry or somewhat more educational rather than emotional. To me, I believe that visuals have such an important presence and part to play when creating those performances, because they can just cut straight to the core, right? They're so immediate. And I try to create performances which are both talk about social and political important issues, but can also, bring the audience into what, wow, and how the content and the form could work together to create emotional experience for the audience as well as educational, right? We want to create many experiences so the audience could be transformed at the end.
Thank you for that. There's a few more questions from the audience. Thinking about your teaching experience, what do you enjoy most about teaching? And what is the most important message that you'd like to leave your students with?
I think what I enjoy most about teaching is my students. They are so eager. They're so different from what we were, 20, 30 years ago. They're so aware of what's going on in the world. They're no longer interested in doing one thing. They want to do many things. They want to learn many things and to discover new forms. And most importantly, they want to transform our field, which I think sometimes we've been failing to transform. They're ready to something new, and to give them tools and knowledge, which then they can use to transform the theater, which is for them no longer needed, is quite exciting for me. So I'm just, guiding them, giving them some tools, moderating them, but nothing more than that, and trying to inspire them. And the message which I would like to give my students: go for it. Really go for it and create what's needed at the moment.
That's great. Another question from the audience: what are the biggest challenges that you face while working on your projects?
Finances. That's, I think, for all of us American theater makers, the budgets and finances, raising money, finding money is the biggest challenge. Especially when starting developing the work. I think it's not, and it's unfortunate because I feel that the creative problems are lesser than the logistical problems to solve. There are so many extraordinary, talented, wonderful theater makers, performance makers in the States, and who are just struggling to make work because of the absence of funding.
Yes, that is the, if you had a solution for that for all of us, I think that would be the magic in a box. It seems we're often
I don't have a solution, but I have the same messages to my students: just go for it and keep going, because I feel if we were chosen to do this work, we just have a responsibility to continue doing this work and to do work which is needed the most.
Yeah. How do you make that work? It is challenging to be an artist in the United States. And I'm thinking just to get your basic needs met. I'm thinking about resources and finances and all of that. How have you managed to make it work through many decades?
Yeah, thank you. It is challenging indeed. I think it's finding balance between projects and teaching is important, and it's important even if you teach to stay very active as a theater maker. And that's challenging because sometimes when you start teaching, you just give yourself fully to your students, but it's also important, you become empty. It's also important to be able to do the work outside of the school. It's also a balance between being a leading artist and creating my own work, for which I need to raise money, and also supporting others as a scenographer or a visual dramaturg or a dramaturg. So it's I have different pockets, creative pockets, which also allow me to stay somehow on the surface and keep going. And all the years are different. One year might be more successful, where you can make more money, and one year might be empty. And it's about being organized and knowing what's needed and create plans. I know that some artists are doing 5-6 shows a year and just running from one theater to another, and that's not something what works for me, because then I feel like it's becoming my job rather than art. And I really love taking time developing my work. I take 1 to 2 years developing my work. And the same with teaching. I really give a lot of time to my students, so I can be, not just their teacher, but their mentor, their friend, and somebody who they can trust and keep having relationships. So it's very hard, especially for a person like me, because I truly commit to what I do.
Do you teach that to your students too, how to make a life as an artist?
I try to, yeah. I try to do my best to teach them that. Because, of course, when they graduate from graduate school with a wonderful MFA degree, they often don't know what to do and where to go.
Yes.
And I think it's important for them to know, what's the next step? What's the next step to take?
It seems it also takes a great deal of trust, too. The idea of trusting in yourself, in your vision, trusting in this path as an artist, because there probably are several weeks or months or maybe years where you may not know what your resources will be like.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes pandemic happens, and I think there is just a great deal of uncertainty for everyone on this planet right now, and we just need to continue going for as long as we have.
Continue going for it. I like that. What else would you like the audience to know or to think about?
I think what I would like the audience to know is that there is always room and time to transform for us as artists, right? I started as a designer, working mostly with costumes, transformed into scenographer, visual dramaturg, director, creator of my own work. There is, at least living in the States, you can constantly shift your career and artistic practice and reinvent yourself. And as soon as you feel like you grow out of that, you reinvent yourself again. I don't know what's next for me. For now, I'm still challenged with what I do, but it might pass in a few more years. And then just constantly asking yourself what's next and how I can be most productive, most useful, and most inspiring for other people.
Well, I am inspired by you. Thank you so much, Irina, for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. And I thank our viewers for lending your ear and engaging with us. I'd also like to thank the American Center in Moscow. And we will be putting a survey link in the chat window. We'd love to hear your experience of today's conversation. Please grab that survey and take a moment to provide your feedback. Irina, thank you so very much for this. And to our audience, please take care of yourselves and of each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.